There's usually some sort of witty hook that I can begin these podcasts with, but I'm not sure where to start other than, goodness me, I need a lie down after everything that happened in that game. That was championship football at its most manic and probably at its most entertaining and best. A 3-3 draw, that ends a week of draws for Norwich City. 3 points from a possible 9, obviously 2 trips away from home in there as well. And we're going to do our best to make sense of the carnage that unfolded at Carrow Road on Sunday. Welcome to this week's edition of the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast. I'm Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy Davitt, Seaman and Adam Harvey. We've had a little bit of time to just take in everything that happened. Errors, a red card, a penalty save, an epic comeback. It was madness. So, Paddy, try and make some sense of that madness after, I don't know, what is it, an hour and a bit or maybe even slightly longer than that after the full-time whistle. How are you feeling? What are your reflections? And have you caught your breath yet?
Yeah, it was. Yes, just about, but only because it's almost now the norm. I mean, we're discussing this now 4 days on from Preston, where they're 2 down after 12 minutes, get back to 2-2. Another game where the wheels came off and it just hurtled along and you wasn't quite sure of the final outcome. And again today, but today even more impressive because for me, Middlesbrough, by some distance, best team Norwich have played this season, better than Leeds. I thought everything that Thorup said pre-match about them, about when they're good, they're very good, and we saw that particularly in that second part of the first half. We'll get into, obviously, Norwich probably afforded them the invitations, and boy did they take them. They were ruthless, and so because of that, this feels an even more epic comeback, but bookending it, two goal deficits, and they've hauled it in, and that says a lot about this group of players and this head coach, that no cause is seemingly lost, and whether it's Preston away when it's Tuesday night and you've got those 700 or so diehards, but it's, it feels a long way from home, and they dug in and they found a way back. And then today, against probably, as I say, for me anyway, on the evidence of what we've seen so far, the best team they've played, and I think the stats would bear that out. Aside from what Johannes was saying, a lot of the metrics that matter, Middlesbrough are there or thereabouts, and you can see now, having viewed them at first glance, that they will be there or thereabouts. Carrick's had time to build something there. They've got some excellent players in forward areas. I thought the 2 central midfielders, they bossed it and they set the tone after Norwich had got themselves in front. So all things considered, that is a tremendous point from Norwich. And, we can probably, and Johannes will, get into the weeds of, what they need to do better, because, it doesn't paper over this week, I think, albeit an unbeaten week, two hard away trips, and now Carrow Road, Middlesbrough. It's 3 points from 9, but you have to. I think for me, where I am now, at relative close proximity to the final whistle, you have to tip it more towards, take your hat off to that group of players and that head coach and the coaching staff, that they find a way when it looks like it's lost. I mean, I couldn't see a way back at half time against this Middlesbrough team, the way the game had been set up there, 3-1 down. So much in control of how the game was playing out. It was very difficult for me to see a way back, and testament to them that they found a way. So yeah, it's a bit of a disorientating week, I think, all told. But as I said, asked Johannes after the game, will he, I feel, learn more from that group of players from this 3-game week than 3 routine wins, because he now knows that no situation seemingly is as dark as it would appear, because they've showed a lot of character and a lot of perseverance. But obviously, the bigger picture is them competing at the top end of the table, and if they're going to do that, then this week I think has also shown that this is still very early on, and there's a lot of work to do and a lot of rough edges to be smoothed out. But 12 games in, I think we'd have probably expected that to be the case. Probably what we wouldn't have expected is that they could go toe-to-toe with Leeds, with Sheffield United, with now Middlesbrough, and over the piece look like they're not too far away from these teams. That has to be very encouraging moving forward.
Yeah, draws against Middlesbrough, Leeds, Sheffield United, as you just say, I think is a good sign of where they're at the moment. And I think Glenn Riddisine mentioned this in the chat as well. The fact that even at this early stage of the season, the fact they're able to go toe-to-toe with a lot of those teams is encouraging. But I think that's the point, isn't it, Sam? When you have a result like this and a comeback like this, and maybe as was the case on Tuesday as well, you lean into more of those sort of intangible qualities of this Norwich team. Character, I probably add personality in there as well, because I'm sure we could maybe go back to times in the not so distant past and looked at some of those situations that Norwich were in and have been in before, where we'd be sat here talking about a 4-1 defeat, a 5-1 defeat, maybe even. So the fact that Norwich have been 2 goals behind in both of the last 2 games and have not lost either of those games, it is a testament to this group and perhaps that insulation of mentality that Paddy spoke about.
Yeah, I think belief is actually the theme that came up the most when I was talking to fans after the game, and they now have the feeling that when Norwich go behind or when they concede first, which obviously they didn't end up doing today, but they did it at Preston, and they have at times, that those fans believe they can come back into the game. And it felt after the David Wagner era that we almost had a bit of a warped idea of the importance of the first goal, which I think still remains, of course, a very important part of the game, and something that Norwich obviously always want to have. But when they go behind, you don't now decide, okay, that sets the narrative for the game and for the week, and that's a real big moment, because this team do have the ability to fight back, and that's something you benefit from majorly when you maybe set up in a more attacking, more proactive way, is that conceding doesn't mean the game plan goes out of the window, and it doesn't impact everything that you do from there on in, and you don't look lost in the way that I think those players did at times when they went behind under Wagner. So that's a really good characteristic to have, but I think it's one that Thorup maybe wants to see a little bit less of going forward, because they have put themselves in very difficult positions in games that they probably will have felt they could have won going in. And although for the feeling and for the narrative and for the momentum, I think it's been a very good week, for the actual points on the board and what they could have done when you looked at the fixtures going into it, I think there maybe will be a slight tinge of disappointment. And yeah, it does feel like quite a complex situation to break down. I'd definitely say more positive than negative still, but it doesn't quite feel like the same elation that maybe there has been at different points. And I think if this comes, in the middle of 2 wins either side of it or a really good run, then it's slightly different. But I went into it thinking Norwich can probably take it from a very average week to a very good week if they can win this game. Obviously, they didn't manage to do that, which means it tends probably more towards the average side of it. But yeah, we've definitely seen some very good qualities. It's just now about making sure you don't have to use them all the time, and you only have to use them, in desperate scenarios, rather than maybe taking your eye off the ball a little bit and finding yourself in the position that they have a couple of times this week. But yeah, still for me, more positive than negative coming out of that game.
We're going to dissect the performance or the game and the various elements and facets of the game in a moment. But Adam, in terms of entertainment, I don't know how you usually spend your Sunday, but that's about the most exciting, pulsating Sunday I think I've had in some time. This game of football, I think even maybe the Borough fans on what is and we know we've done it plenty of times, that long journey home, I think maybe by hour 3 or 4, they might be able to appreciate the game that they've watched, even though the team obviously squandered a 2-goal lead. But I think everyone will have probably left Carrow Road in the main just feeling very, very entertained and happy with the game of football that they watched, even amid errors, and we'll get into goalkeeping situations and refereeing decisions. But all of it came together and made for, just I will basically want to outstretch my arms and go, you're not entertained, because that was basically, I think, the overriding feeling from today.
Yeah, it was almost a throwback to sort of peak Daniel Farke. You sort of go back to Millwall at home or Forest at home, or all these games where they still stick out in the memory right now. And you almost contrast that to last year, where they had such a good run at home. They won games quite frequently. But if you ask me about a win over X team last year, sort of in February, I probably wouldn't have that great a memory of it. Yet here I am. I'd probably remember this game now for quite a number of years to come, because of all the drama, the entertainment, and the brilliance that was in it. Goals that will stick out. In Sainz, obviously, we're going to mention probably his 2 goals and the individual quality that he showed on both occasions to find the top corner. But yeah, I mean, if you're a paying fan, you just want to see entertainment, and I think you're getting that by the bucket load at the moment this season at home. And even those on the road, you know, I mean, the fact that they're seeing their team go toe to toe, even when they're 2-0 down at Preston, they don't lose belief. They still have that sort of inner feeling that they'll come back into the game and get something out of it. And I mean, that's kind of where teams that often have successful seasons kind of build their platform from. It's just making yourself hard to beat. Just keep picking up points even when you're not at your best, and then obviously hopefully when it fully clicks into gear and we're maybe talking in December about certain games, I'm hoping that Norwich will have almost learnt their mistakes from certain errors today, and that brilliance that they showed, they can just show more frequently and more consistently, and hopefully that will be enough to make this season quite a memorable one.
Yeah, it's the type of result I think that builds togetherness, isn't it? Because as Sam said, I think in the round you could look at 3 points from 9 and probably feel a little bit disappointed or shortchanged from that probably as a return, but again, put the context, the injuries. They're obviously now going to have to play without Kenny McLean, I think, for a period. But the players that they've lost, the effort that they've had to put in to be in the third game of a 3-game week, 3-1 down at half time, and actually be willing to roll your sleeves up and say, no, I'm going to go to the trenches and I'm going to try and pull this back for the people around me and for the team that I'm in. I think that speaks volumes about the type of culture that Johannes Hoff Thorup has already been able to cultivate this short of a period into what Norwich is trying to do, and probably speaks about the mindset as well, because as we said, I think if you're not in a place where you're feeling positive or the general energy around the place isn't positive, you probably do sink at 3-1, and who knows, if the penalty goes in, I think they probably would have sunk maybe at 4-1. So I think it speaks volumes of just what they've been able to create even at this very early stage, where maybe the quality wasn't there, certainly in consistent periods, but the attitude, that willingness to fight certainly was, and I think that's a major encouragement. Right, let's go through the game. How long have we got? So Sainz scores. We'll come back to Borja Sainz, which is why I'm sort of skating past it a little bit, but we'll come back to Borja Sainz later on. Let's start with Middlesbrough's equaliser. And I think actually before I'll maybe cover the bit in between, and I'll throw over to you, Paddy, for the equaliser. But I think we're beginning to see, and this is a little bit of a concern, I think, for me, a little bit of a trend now where Norwich score and then have a period of real passivity. And I'm not sure, and there's a little bit of game state around that, because I think naturally if you score a goal, you do ease up a little bit psychologically. And whether there's something in that sort of mental side, as much as we praise it, that needs to be sort of, the bonnet needs to be pulled up and looked at from that. But it was another spell where, again, goals impact both teams, and it's such a low scoring game, football, that it does. There are big moments when goals go in, and so it affects both teams. So Norwich probably eased off and Borough probably pushed a little bit, and that probably ultimately led us to a period of really sustained pressure. But you look at the way Borough responded to the equalising goal compared to how Norwich responded to the opening goal, and I think that maybe paints the picture of concern a little bit, because, and we saw it against Hull, even though they won that game, Watford as well, these sort of 10 minutes periods where they get stuck in a bit of a low block and really can't get themselves up the pitch. That's a little bit of concern, I think. But the equaliser, Paddy, I'm looking actually because on the table there's a picture of George Long, and we're going to have to speak to him again, because it's a goalkeeping error, isn't it? Which is there's no excuse the pun, long or short way of addressing it other than that, because Conway doesn't. It's not a brilliant connection. It's not a brilliant finish. He's put it in obviously at the near post. And whether that's sort of caught Long out a little bit, I don't know. But it's one that I think when he sits down and watches it back, he's going to be really disappointed with.
Yeah, I mean, none of us, I'm pretty sure, around this table are goalkeeping coach experts, so we're not going to dissect the art of the goalkeeper, because I think we'd be on thin ice. But I mean, it seems to roll up his shin, and for me, his body position there is almost like his weight is transferred onto his back foot rather than he's going forward, and it's just a poor goal to concede from a defensive point of view, really. But when that was put to Johannes, he was keen to broaden it out and say it was actually, and he's right. You look at that defensive line as the ball came in. How has he got that much room? It's like Callum Dole seems to be occupying two players. So clearly there was a breakdown in, to paraphrase Johannes, their man orientation set up there. So you could look at that element. But then, of course, when the ball does get to him, I mean, he's guided it on target. But yeah, I mean, it didn't feel, watching it in real time, it had the sort of power that really should be sneaking in. But I don't know if we're going to move swiftly on to George Long when those two duelled again from the penalty spot. But he had a better outcome there, and you know it is sadly the life of a keeper. You look at Borough's keeper for Norwich's final and equalising goal. That's a poor error as well. Similar near post, same goal mouth, in fact. So, yeah, for me, that's a goalkeeping error, and I'm sure we're going to get into now if you broaden it out off the back of the Preston penalty, and even maybe if you want to be uncharitable, his role in Stokes' equaliser. It's not been, you would argue, even with a penalty save to cap it off, the best of weeks when he was trying to put down a marker to justifiably be, when fit again, a rival to Angus Gunn.
No, agreed. And I guess the point then to pick up on that, and we are going to skip ahead and we'll come back, and I think we're going to do that constantly in the flow of this conversation, reflecting on the game. But he's obviously, and again, I'm sure he would say this. So I don't think we're being uncharitable, but he's made a massive error there that's cost Norwich a goal. You then fast forward to that gap, as Paddy mentions, between the third goal and what potentially could have been the fourth goal and Norwich's second. He saves a penalty. Now, we can debate the quality of the penalty or how good a penalty it was. It was a pretty poor one, let's be honest, but he still had to make it. And I do feel for him as an individual in the moment that he's in at the moment, where I'm sure confidence has been in short supply, because look, you don't have to be on social media, I think, to know that maybe you're getting criticised or that there is that weight of negativity, because I think you can feel it, you know it in yourself if your performances have been there or not. I thought he made a few fairly good saves today, actually. There was one from Azaz in the first half where he sort of sprawled to his right and made a good one-handed save. Again, there was another, I think, from Azaz again that sort of came through a sea of bodies. So there was good moments there. I know people have maybe looked at the third goal, but personally, I think he's pushed that far enough away from goal that Norwich should then be able to clear it. Obviously, then it's a case of who responds first, and that's Ben Doak. But that penalty moment, and it's the moment really that the game turned, I think that's fair to say, in terms of energy, momentum, but also in terms of the crowd, because Carrow Road was pretty flat at that point, because Middlesbrough were 3-1 up. It was a real key moment. And I guess all we can do really is hope now that that's a real changing point for him, and hopefully lifts his confidence a little bit.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but someone replied to me on X at half time saying that they think either Norwich will go on and lose 5-1 or 6-1, or they will equalise. And it felt like actually that was crystallised in that moment, because obviously that penalty goes in, it's 4-1. Norwich probably at that point, obviously they wouldn't stop running, but in their minds I think would know that's the point's gone. There's no chance of coming back there. And then maybe do you ease off? Do Borough go and get a couple more goals? And is the feeling around Carrow Road actually really, really negative? But Long obviously saves that penalty. A massive cheer, a massive wave of momentum, and I actually thought you could feel the Barclay in particular, but actually the whole of the ground get louder from that moment. It was the loudest I've heard Carrow Road for a while, even allowing for some of the incredible atmospheres that have been created there over the last few months. And I think it completely changed the game. As you said, maybe not the best penalty, but I think it takes actually a lot of courage to just stand there and wait for the penalty, as he did. Obviously, we're seeing more and more players doing that thing where they sort of wait for the keeper to go and then try to slot it in the opposite corner. But it's still hard when you've got 27,000 people there watching you, just to hold your nerve and to stay there and stay there and stay there, and know that if he just rifles it into the corner that you're going to look quite silly, not even moving to stop the penalty. But he held his nerve, even being aware of all the mistakes that he's made recently and the pressure on him. And then when it's not a great penalty, he's there and he's in position to stop it. So yeah, I think for the team it was a really crucial moment, and for him it might even be a more crucial moment, because we've seen the rate of errors has been pretty poor. You can question him for both Preston goals, you can question him for the Stoke one and the first one today, as Paddy outlined. So you can see actually that these things can affect you every game if a goalkeeper doesn't have the confidence. And given it probably will be another couple before Angus Gunn returns, him having that extra confidence could save Norwich a couple of points. So I thought it was actually a really big moment for him as well as in the game, and it completely turned things on its head there, really.
Yeah, I mean, we had this discussion around him a little bit last week, but I think there is. And look, so I think it's right to say this as well. So some of the criticism that there has been fair and just and based on numbers or logic, and hasn't been sort of over the top. But when it gets into the realms of like, he's the worst goalkeeper I've ever seen. Come on, it's just not helpful, is it? It's not useful. It's not constructive. And ultimately, whether it's him or whether it's people around him, I just don't think it helps any sort of situation because he's not. So. Hopefully that moment is a big one for him, and obviously it's one that Norwich are going to have to get right in terms of his performances, because it looks like they're going to be without Angus Gunn for a period of time, and I think that there has been this feeling maybe from certain groups that almost waiting for him to make an error, and I think that's really unfair, and like the Stoke one, that's sort of been nitpicked to the nth degree. I'm not sure it does if that's Angus Gunn in that situation. Whether or not you want to argue whether or not Angus Gunn would be in that situation is fine. But as we've mentioned, there's a lot of mitigation to that role. It's hard to come in cold as well, having not played much football. You've got to be a certain personality to do it, because we know Norwich have had second choice goalkeepers in the past who, as the weeks and months have gone on, have got irritated and aren't good around the group, and that does have an effect on it. So you need to be a certain type of personality, and that likely means that there's going to be probably a little bit of a quality difference in terms of number one to number two, because the reality is, if everything goes well, George Long doesn't play a single game of Championship football. That's what we're talking as a best case situation, which is pretty mad. We wouldn't talk about Norwich's backup left back in that position, or their midfielder in that position. So yeah, it's a unique one, and also it's expensive to have two goalkeepers who are pretty close and can become pretty disruptive, as we saw with the whole cruel gun debate. So good moment for him, and hopefully something that he can build upon, with obviously recognition that there's been errors in his game as well. So Adam, from that first goal, we'll skip back now to where Borough were after that, and I thought, as Paddy said, for the second half of the first half, they were absolutely irresistible. I thought Norwich couldn't get near them. Morrison and Hackney in particular were superb, I thought, but Ben Doak, I mean, what a talent he looks. I guess the frustration for goal number 2 is the fact that not only it comes from Norwich's corner, but also that Anis Ben Slimani has, I think, at least 3 or 4 opportunities to bring him down, to stop that attack. And you can see he has a couple of nibbles at his shirt, but he never really gets to a point where he maybe goes with what George Edmondson did to Sargent, with the arms around the neck and pulling him down. You just cannot, in that situation, let him get away from you. And he let him get away from him, and from there it was always going to end in a goal, I felt.
Yeah, and I think what makes it more frustrating is in the second half he'd done exactly what he should have done in the first half, and ultimately stopped Borough trying to get a breakaway. I think looking back, he'll know that he should have just taken him down, taken the yellow card, professional foul, and Norwich don't concede that goal, because ultimately as soon as the ball got slid through, you thought, yep, they're going to score here, because they had about 3 or 4 on one. So I think it's a frustrating one, because obviously at that point as well, Norwich was still at 1-1, and you just thought, right, calm it down a bit here, because Borough in the ascendancy and almost knife through butter at different points, in the way that they were just cutting Norwich open, and they just needed to regroup a little bit, and the last thing they wanted to do was concede the second, and unfortunately they did, and then as we'll probably mention, the third goal is then them in the ascendancy, and at that point you think, okay, this is going to be a tough journey now for Norwich to try and navigate to get anything out of this game, and obviously thankfully some individual brilliance got them out of that, but for Slimani point of view, I think he's been so good in recent weeks that you can almost mitigate a little bit for it. I'm sure he won't let it get him down, and he'll be back to his best again against Cardiff, because I actually don't think he had his best afternoon today, but fortunately enough for him, there were some other individuals that did.
Yeah, I was sat there going, just rugby tackle him, bring him down, just do anything to not let him carry the ball as far as he did. But Ben Doak, I think, is some talent, isn't he, on the basis of what we've seen today. And maybe, as showed when Borough took him off, I don't think it's a coincidence, and Conway, to be fair, I don't think it's a coincidence that their collective performance dipped. In between the second and third goal, Paddy, and we'll come to the third goal in a moment, but there was a moment with George Edmondson and Josh Sargent. Edmondson on loan from Ipswich, on a booking, both arms around Sargent's neck. Is he fortunate to stay on the pitch in that situation for you?
Well, wasn't given as a foul, was it? So, I mean, that's just ridiculous. Again, I only seen it. I think I might have seen one replay, but it was WWF. So
Hey, isn't it? I think WWF's the charity.
Well, my age maybe, but
that's for the pandas, isn't it?
Oh,
WWF, I think.
Is it? Okay, yeah. I wasn't a big fan of wrestling, if I'm brutally honest. I don't know why I've gone that route, but there you go. But was he already on the booking at that point?
Yes.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, this compounds it then, doesn't it? Because I don't know if we're getting into the last man and Denala goal scoring up, but I mean, it was pretty central and not that far from outside the penalty area. So, yeah, but we'll probably be revisiting about the officials when we get into the Kenny McLean debate. But if that is the case, then I mean, at the very least, why it's not a Norwich free kick, I do not know. And then you could feasibly have seen a yellow card, but certainly a foul. Yeah, poor that was. But maybe it's where we are now with officials in this league. They do seem to be a bit inconsistent, to be diplomatic.
Yeah, and I think we've shown on this pod that we don't really like to go at referees, and we don't like to, because let's be honest, the refereeing, I actually thought, and we'll come on to it later, but the two big ones I thought he probably got right, to be honest. But around that, I thought generally it was a pretty poor performance in terms of the management of it and the erraticness of it and whatnot. And we could probably get into a general conversation about the quality, but let's not do that, because I think that's pretty tiresome. But Sam, the third goal again probably comes at a really bad time for Norwich, doesn't it? Because after the second one, as Adam says, you probably want a period of just digging in and being able to almost ride through to half time to then regroup. So to then concede the third goal in the manner that they did as well, I think will have been really frustrating. But it was a poor time to concede a goal generally.
Yeah, I think it showed probably a bit of weakness game management wise, and you can understand it psychologically, the optimism of going a goal behind and then wanting to end the half, in the best possible way and trying to get an equaliser. But that close to the break, I think you have to just sort of recalibrate, get into half time. They had, been pretty good offensively at times in that first half and shown that they had the ability to get in behind that Borough defence. So it wasn't like they had no evidence that they were going to get back into it. If they'd gone in at half time 2-1, as obviously showed by the fact that they could get back into the game, they would have had a decent chance still of getting a result. But you felt maybe that they were too rocked by that second goal, that they maybe were too keen to make up for it, and rather than a little bit of game management, of trying to slow the momentum a little bit and stop that barrage of Borough attacks, they allowed them in again. Not a great goal defensively, organisationally. Once that shot goes in and it gets parried by Long, and I agree with you. I think putting it where he does, it looks bad because Doak then reacts and squares it, but ultimately that's where goalkeepers get told to push the ball, and the alternative would have been him parrying it straight through the middle of the goal where somebody maybe has a tap in. It's basically 50-50 in that sense, but they don't react well enough when the shot gets saved. They don't get back in position quick enough, and I thought from a defensive point of view, it was as chaotic as it's looked at times this season. I thought against Preston, it was maybe more of a tactical issue. It was them taking time to adapt to the sort of pressing demands that Thorup has and some of the communication around that. But this was pretty much basic defending that you learn at a young age, and they just didn't get themselves sorted quick enough. So yeah, that will be a really frustrating goal to concede. And as you said, I think the timing is particularly frustrating because at that point in the half, you should be able to manage it to half time, because Borough probably, if Norwich had sat in and made it a little bit more difficult, wouldn't have pushed especially hard themselves, knowing that they had the lead. So I think a 2-1 deficit would have felt much better going into half time. You can understand the feeling around it, but yeah, at that point, it maybe needs some of your more experienced heads to say, okay, everyone, calm it down. Let's just get into half time and then see what we can change to try and improve it.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I think maybe the conversations probably amongst supporters at half time was, does he go a free? Does he throw this player on it? And he didn't. And actually, I felt. And this is the case, I think, sometimes with teams when they are behind at half-time, is they can put so much into the first 10 minutes chasing a goal that when that doesn't come, the game basically dies a death. But Norwich were pretty good, actually, in terms of just keeping themselves in it and just trying to get, I guess, a foothold back into the game, which they did until they then conceded the penalty, which, unless any of you are going to shout, I think we were all pretty confident was a penalty. Yeah. Which obviously then we've spoken about. We'll sidestep Sainz again because we're going to do a bit longer bit on him, but he scored a tap in, wasn't worth looking back. And then Callum Fisher. I mean, Adam, cross, or is he meant that? That's a cross, isn't it? There's no debate. But I guess probably the wider conversation is about the momentum that Norwich had at that stage with the penalty save, with Sainz's goal. It almost after that second goal felt inevitable that Norwich were going to get themselves back in the game. And as we spoke about, from shift of feeling, probably from 12 months ago or 24 months ago, it's massive just how quickly they've been able to achieve that, as you said, almost that Farker-esque sense that a game is never dead until it's done, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely a cross. But yeah, it's sometimes your luck's in, and it feels like Norwich are maybe on that sort of side of it to an extent, but they're also doing all the good stuff that means they merit that luck at points, and you do make your own luck in a lot of ways in life, and I think Norwich are sort of at that that stage almost at the moment, and it's obviously a poor error from Dieng, and I'm sure when he looks back at it as well, he'll be disappointed because it's sort of narrowly sort of clips near the post and it kind of comes off his sort of foot and his arm and comes everywhere. But for Norwich, it probably was merited at that point, and I think the crowd definitely played their part in that. I mean, Thorup sort of spoke pre-match and even post-match about kind of that, the fact that the supporters, even when they're 2 goals behind, are still fully behind them and backing them, and you can hear it vocally. And I certainly felt when the penalty was saved, and then obviously when they get the one to narrow the deficit to 1, the third goal was inevitable because the crowd were fully on board. And it almost felt like at that point they were then ready to kick on again and try and find the winner. But obviously, unfortunately, an event that we were going to talk about has maybe sort of stifled that a little bit in the end with McLean's red card. But I think, certainly from the position of 2 goals down and certainly 70th minute, whatever it was, and at that stage you're thinking, okay, this is probably not going to be Norwich's afternoon, and that long unbeaten home record is going to come to an end. So to Fisher to sort of find the goal somehow or other through a goalkeeping error is obviously sent supporters home relatively happy, and it gives them another good platform to build off when they go to Cardiff on Saturday.
Yeah, what I will say for Fisher is I think the fact that he's scuffed it as bad as he scuffed it has completely caught Dieng out more than anything else, and then obviously he really struggles to recover. And I think you're right, with 11 men on the pitch, I think we probably all have backed Norwich to go on and get the winner there. It was I'm not quite sure the minute the goal was on, but they certainly had enough time, it felt like, to go and grab it. And then Paddy, we get to the last probably bit of drama, and we've done well, I think, to condense it in as quick a moment as we have. But Kenny McLean's red card, which we'll discuss now, which we've had a little bit of a look post match. I think we're pretty confident it falls under serious foul play, which would be a 3-game ban. I know you asked Johannes about it post-game and didn't completely rule out an appeal, but on the grounds that he hadn't seen it back yet, I think when he sees it back, I'd be surprised if they do appeal it. I'll read the definition for serious foul play and I'll let you pick up sort of with your thoughts on it. But in the law, it says a tackle or challenge that endangers the safety of an opponent or uses excessive force or brutality must be sanctioned as serious foul play. Any player who lunges at an opponent in challenging for the ball from the front, from the side, or from behind using one or both legs with excessive force endangers the safety of an opponent is guilty of serious foul play. And I think from the tackle that Kenny McLean produced, it's going to be pretty difficult for Norwich City to come up with an argument that makes that definition not relevant when it comes to that particular tackle, I think.
Well, we were discussing it on the walk back up the hill, and in terms of what possible grounds could they appeal, and if that is, the current FA guidance, and I think we arrived at the only sliver of hope would be on the excessive force element of it. And for me, no, I just can't see how that would be deemed not to be excessive force. But then, then you get into the, we're not party to, what an appeal process looks like. Obviously, it's pertinent because we're discussing a fixture in which Sainz had a red card overturned last season. That was for a violent conduct tangle with Johnny Howson. But as it turned out, they clearly felt the grounds were there, and they were able to argue their case successfully and use all the various circumstantial evidence to bring to bear. With this one, I don't quite see those avenues to a successful appeal. So I think that's obviously something you just automatically, if you're Norwich, have to look at, because as Johannes went on to also say, Kenny McLean is such an important player for them. We know Marcelino Nunes is unlikely to be back this side of the international break, so to have him and McLean unavailable for these next 3 games or so, if it is a 3-game ban upheld, subject to them appealing, you have to explore every available avenue open to you. But I think when when the dust settles, and when Johannes and his coaching staff have probably looked at that and analysed that and the footage. Yeah, I mean, it's not, if anybody's seen it back, it's not. But I think where the game has gone now, it's not one of those where, well, he hasn't tried to decapitate him at the knee or whatever. But we live in different times now in terms of what constitutes red and yellow cards, and in that context,
it is the type of tackle. So it does fall under serious foul play, but it's the type of tackle where you think, 3 games feels harsh for what it is.
That's right. For me, that is the point. Yeah, I don't think that necessarily is.
You always need like a subcategory, don't you? Almost?
Yeah, well, like the debate is eternally around these orange type cards, something in between, and yeah, a 3-game tariff for that challenge feels harsh, but in terms of, is it a red card? Yes, and if it is, and that's serious foul play is the category, then 3 games it is. So yeah, I think. I just can't. Yeah, I can't. Only on the excessive force point, but even that, the way it looks.
It's the lunge, isn't it? It's
exactly.
the way he lunges into it.
He's not got any part of the ball, and it's very clearly, an attempt to halt a player. It's not an attempt to win the ball for me. It's an attempt to halt a Borough counter attack.
Can you remember there was a similar one? I think it was away at Millwall last season that was given in Norwich's favour. It was quite a similar situation where the lad caught someone and got a straight red. And I think that at the time everyone in the ground was like, "Oh, straight red for that." But then you watch it back, and I think I'd have to watch it back. But it feels to me like quite a similar example. I don't think from memory that got overturned.
No, and I think we're in the same territory now here, which as we probably would all agree, 3 games is harsh, but it will be 3 games, and it's not even today really, albeit with 11 on the pitch, you could have seen a fairy tale win, but it's more the damage now moving forward. It's Cardiff, it's Sheffield Wednesday, and it's, remind me who the third. Yeah, well, Hillsborough away. That's made for Kenny McLean, I think. A midweek game under the Knights at Hillsborough. They're going to miss him big style in that game. And on top of, losing the control that Nunes has brought to them. And you saw again today what a big miss he is. That's a real conundrum now for Johannes and how he solves that, starting with Cardiff Saturday.
Yeah, and in part 2 of the pod, we will discuss that conundrum, speak Borja Sainz, and talk about some of the changes that have happened off the pitch at Norwich City this week as well. See you in a second. Welcome back. Part 2 of the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast following a slightly breathless 3-3 draw against Middlesbrough. We were just discussing that Kenny McLean red card, and I guess to move it on, Sam, the next point is what way to Norwich City go. Let's presume that they, that any appeal is unsuccessful, or they decide not to appeal it at all. Where do you see Johannes Hoff Thorup going? Because in terms of midfielders, they're beginning to look a little bit light. Nunez out, obviously now McLean as well, and I think in terms of the midfield makeup, you maybe looked at Nunez, for example, and as Thorup said, there's not a direct replacement, but I think you could maybe negate that slightly. McLean, probably in the role that he plays, it's very difficult to see how another player can slot into that role with the same effect and bring the same level of control that he brings from those areas.
Yeah, I think if I could find a way to replace his qualities with the squad that they have currently available, I should probably quit my job and go into football management, because it's definitely a difficult problem that Thorup faces. We discussed possibility of a sort of back 3, back 5, which I suppose would reduce the number of bodies you would need in midfield. It would mean probably as simple as Slimane plus one other, which effectively takes McLean out and replaces him with a defender, which given, and it's a totally different discussion, but sort of some of the struggles that Callum Doyle has had and some of the problems Thorup has trying to fit all of his best players into the team, it would solve that problem. But it was something we spoke about as well before Preston, when we talked about a potential back 3 and replacing Nunez, the fact that Thorup loves to have possession and control, and both of those things are quite hard to achieve, especially on the road when you don't have 3 in midfield, because almost every team in this league does have 3 in midfield. And when you don't have the number of players in that area, then you need those 2 to cover a lot more ground, and maybe ironically or unfortunately, probably the two players most capable of covering ground in the Norwich midfield are Marcelino Nunez and Kenny McLean. So I'd agree with you. I think there is a real lack of a direct replacement for McLean. You've got Sorensen in there, who, first of all, is quite a different player, and secondly, will struggle to have the fitness to play that role. And then beyond that, well, there aren't really many options, are there? There's a Mankwa Forsen, who got used as a right winger today, definitely doesn't have the same physical ability as McLean. You've got Schwartau, who does most of his work away from the ball, which is almost completely the opposite to McLean. And then you've got Silmane in there and Marcondes, who you'd expect to be in the team anyway. So it's actually hard to find a way how he does it, really, aside from a sort of formation change. And it is certainly a test for him. We spoke actually in our international break pod about the fact that these were the tough tests coming up, with the regularity of the games, the fact that injury was increasingly becoming something for Norwich to contend with, and that seems to have reached its peak so far at this moment. So I think it'll be a very, very interesting team news dropping ahead of that Cardiff game on Saturday. And it's where Thorup will probably have to earn his money as a coach, because it's a big problem. I've said a lot of words there without offering any potential solutions, but hopefully that tells you how big a loss McLean will be and how difficult it is to replace him, because that feels to me like the main area in that Norwich squad where they're maybe lacking a bit of depth.
Okay, two solutions. One, I'm gonna rehash the three at the back formation that I brought out on last week's pod and throw it back onto the table, because I think there's a genuine option here. So two slightly different, I think, ways you could go with that, and the variations really are in terms of how structurally you do it from an attacking perspective. But I could see a 3-4-3 type situation where you have Long, Duffy, Cordoba, Doyle, Stacey, Cresene, Slimani, one of probably Marcondes or Schwartau, Sainz on one side, Sinats on the other, Sargent. So that would be the first one. Then I also think maybe you could do something slightly different and maybe have your midfield two, maybe then push Sainz into a bit more of a central role as a 10 and go with two up front. And that would give you a slightly different sort of thing. And maybe you could play around with variations of the two. Adam, any other advance on that? If he was to stick with the 4-3-3, I'm putting you in a much difficult situation. Where do you think he would go in terms of midfielders? Because we saw Callum Fisher get dragged inside as well, seen him play there in pre-season. So does he come into the thinking? What do you think in terms of those areas?
Yeah, I wonder whether Fisher is an option. Obviously in midfield, he sort of played around with that a little bit in pre-season, and at times he's comfortable on the ball, comfortable in tight spaces, able to get his head up and find a pass. But again, whether he can really provide that sort of physicality that McLean would give you, that feels tough. Gabe Forsyth has obviously had moments in a team, but again, still looks quite young, and that's quite a big test to throw him in there for what would be a 3-game week, assuming that McLean's not going to be available for 3 games. So again, that feels quite tough to be a sort of longer term option for 3 quite difficult fixtures. Forsen covers ground, but again doesn't have the physicality. So again, it just all bleeds into this conversation that it is going to be really difficult to find that direct McLean replacement, which to me probably lends me to probably agree with your first option there, maybe going with a 3 at the back. And I felt at times today they've struggled a little bit down the flanks, which hopefully that would maybe, particularly going away to Cardiff, which obviously would be a team that generally have a little bit more physicality. Probably not the worst thing in the world to have an extra body in terms of sort of that defensive line. Even going to Hillsborough, again, I think we saw it last year that Norwich got exposed quite badly in sort of physical battles. It was Michael Smith, I think, with one of the headers and Heckway. So maybe again that's a game that might lend itself to trying that. But Thorup's been pretty consistent so far this season with the way he sets up his team. So whether he wants to take that risk and try and change it is up for him and Glenn and Jack and all these other ones in the Norwich coaching department to try and find that solution. And they're better placed and paid to, of course, find that, and we're not.
Yeah, indeed, and we definitely won't do the lazy joke about saying, can they register Jack Wilshere, which I think is going to happen on a few occasions. Let's get that out of the way early. But I think I've probably just done it a little bit, yeah, but it's fine. We won't do it again. Paddy, in terms of names that maybe could be in the conversation, perhaps should be in the conversation, Oscar Schwartau, I thought he came on again today and looked pretty encouraging. He gives you a slightly different option in terms of running. Do you think he now needs to be in that conversation for midfield in terms of Cardiff?
I think I'd go with him. Yeah. If you're not doing anything with the formation, then
would you? That's my point. You change the formation.
No, well, I think Adam's point is a fair one, that he hasn't tended to want to do that, but I think McLean and Nunes is a bit of a game changer because they are both unique in many regards within this squad, but also in terms of the midfield balance. And they've maybe you could argue they haven't, but they've been able to sort of mask a little bit. No Nunes and McLean. I wouldn't be surprised if this was now this stretch of games, subject to obviously McLean being unavailable for the next 3 and Nunes, that he would broach changing it up a little bit in terms of formation. But no, if it was he was going to stay with his game model and his base formation, then I think Schwartau again today. I like, he has got the physicality for me because he's a big presence. He's got an engine on him and he can get about the pitch. I'm not saying that the more defensive side of the midfield demand would come natural to him. It doesn't feel that is his game really. He's more breaking into the box. I mean, we saw him. I think it was at 3-3, wasn't it? We had that chance near post. I think it was Sainz, Doyle, and then cut back, and he just couldn't sort his feet out. But that feels what his game is about, is breaking into the opposition penalty area. But he just looks comfortable. He just looks comfortable in the possession. It doesn't faze him taking the ball in tight spaces. He's got good technical ability, and as I say, physically, it feels like looking at him, he has got that. Whereas maybe Forson doesn't possess that element. So, yeah, for me, of a rather reduced amount of runners and riders, he would be the one I'd go and play probably alongside Marcondes and Slimani, and obviously at least that would give you a degree of familiarity, particularly Slimani and Schwartau, because they both played together at Brøndby, didn't they? And of course Marcondes' background in Danish football, so that has a little bit of merit. I mean, of course, talking of Danes, we've got Jakob Sorensen to throw into the mix, but it could be quite a tall order to throw him in from the start against Cardiff. But Marcondes was fast-tracked in a sense of needs must once Nunes was ruled out. So I think you have to say he comes into his thinking as well. Another week's training. He came on today, didn't he, towards the end? So, yeah, for me, I think you're probably perming, if he sticks 4-3-3 for Cardiff, probably 3 out of those 4 would be the way I think he'll go.
If you've got any other creative solutions, then do let us know from maybe ones that we've missed. But Sam, let's talk Borja. I mean, look, the first goal's excellent, but I almost want to move on to that because that's almost become like not the standard thing, but that's like a trademark Sainz, isn't it? Inside on the right foot, bang, top corner.
Although he hasn't done as many of those this season as I expected.
True, me neither. But on that second goal, I mean, the angle, when you think, I mean, we were right behind it in the press box. It's such a small area that he has the opportunity to hit in order to score there. The technique, the pace, I almost want to throw in the audacity to cut inside and to shoot from there. I think it speaks volumes about where he's at the moment. That's obviously 10 league goals for him now, which is 3 more than anybody has got in the Championship. The next one is Josh Madger on 7, and then there's a group of 4 players. Hadji Wright is one of them, I think, who are on 5. So to be basically on double the amount of goals than third on the goal scoring list is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't think anyone, when they said that Sainz needed to step up in terms of the numbers he was producing this season, thought it would be 10 within, 12 games now?
12 goal contributions in this many games.
Plus 1 in the League Cup as well. So, yeah, he's stepped up in a big way and he's just absolutely full of confidence. I thought what was especially encouraging today was the fact that he probably didn't have his best game. I actually can't think of too much that he did well apart from those 2 goals. But, of course, you score 2 goals like that, you don't really need to bother with anything else. So, yeah, the quality was unbelievable. That second goal in particular, the first touch was actually what made it so good for me because you can tell he's already thinking about scoring a goal, which probably does speak to that confidence. The fact that he gets the ball probably closer to the byline than where he actually ends up. And the first touch is immediately with the thought, how can I create the angle to then try and shoot at goal? And as you said, there's a very, very small part of the goal where he can get it past Dieng there, and I think it actually hits the apex on the way in. Yeah, an absolutely unbelievable finish, and if you're going to have someone digging you out with those sorts of moments, you don't need to be perfect all the time. And it does feel like very, very quickly he's gone from the sort of, decent player to absolute top echelon star for Norwich. He's probably added 7 or 8 million to his valuation in the last couple of months, and it feels like he is maybe the next cab off the rank in terms of those big sales. And maybe I shouldn't be throwing it forward to that already, because Norwich fans still do have a decent amount of time to enjoy him. But yeah, I think everyone's waking up to what a fantastic player he is, and yeah, he's produced it again. And you just wonder if this is ever going to run out, because if not, it's hard not to be in the promotion mix and the playoff mix if you have a player playing that well, along with some of the players that he's combining with as well. And we're just running out of superlatives to talk about Borja Sainz now, and it's eating up quite a lot of podcasts. We're probably having to put 5 or 10 minutes aside every single week just to talk about him. But yeah, 2 fantastic moments for Norwich again today, and he's along with that penalty save from George Long, basically turned the game on its head himself.
Yeah, and I almost think, like you say, when you talk about a player so much and he's been so good, it can almost not pass you by, but it's almost difficult then to put into context of anything. So I think maybe the best thing to put it into context is the fact that there's only 2 players in the top 4 leagues that have scored 10 goals at this stage of the season. One of them's Erling Haaland, the other one's Borja Sainz. I mean, it's mega, absolutely mega what he's done in terms of that goal scoring return. And I think also, and I spoke to him post game, it's almost the confidence now. And actually, I think he said it, I'm paraphrasing, it might not have been exactly like this, but it was, or it might have been, I don't know. But he basically went, I believe every time now I shoot that I'm going to score. And to have that as an attacking player is special. And I think you can see that's maybe why he's getting into some of those positions and seeing such a small part of the goal and thinking, no, do you know what, I can do that. I can hit that with some venom, which is good. To flip that though, Adam, and maybe to change the conversation slightly, is there a bit of a worry from a Norwich City perspective and a Norwich City attacking perspective? I'd need to work it out in terms of exactly how many goals it is from how many, but a very, very high proportion of their goals at the moment are being scored or assisted by either Borja Sainz or Josh Sargent. So we talk about the injuries that they're getting and whatnot. There probably is going to be at some point a need for goals to come from other areas. That being said, if Sainz can cut inside and produce goals like that every week, then I guess it's probably largely irrelevant.
Yeah, that would obviously be the challenge if unfortunate events happen, then somebody else has to be thrown into the mix and step up. I think they've got options. I mean, I think Cade Gordon is a player that I'm excited to see more of. I mean, obviously, fortunately for him, he's got other players in certain positions that he plays that are playing well at the moment. I mean, seeing that, we can debate, whether there's an opportunity maybe there for him to try and push a claim, but clearly, Johannes doesn't feel he's in a position to start games because he hasn't done it yet. So I'm intrigued to see what he can produce, because he's clearly direct. Obviously got the goal against Hull from just having that sort of little bit of instinct about him to find the bottom corner. And obviously, he's a player that was picked up by Liverpool, and you don't end up being thrown in by Jurgen Klopp unless you've got something about you. So he's the one that I think maybe I'm intrigued to see whether he can provide the goals and assists and the contributions in those sort of attacking areas, because aside from that, particularly when you take Nunez out of the team, who felt like maybe he was starting to step up in terms of creative numbers, obviously a couple of goals already this season, and I wanted to try and see him maybe push those assist numbers up a little bit, because I think he's got the ability with the way he can find passes from almost anywhere to do that. So they're probably the players, but I think there's got to be a little bit of concern, particularly, even Josh Sargent, maybe not quite in terms of goal scoring numbers yet where he maybe would want to be personally, but obviously still scored lots of goals. And you think if you take him out of the mix, particularly given that, Cianats has generally been played out wide, could he step up if he went in the middle? And, Barnes obviously still out at the moment, so you've not really got any other options. And yeah, that would obviously have to be a huge concern if either of those were out for any extended period of time, because as Norwich, saw last season when Sargent wasn't available from the end of August till early January, they suffered, and their form suffered badly because of it, because he's such a key player in this team, and arguably still one of, if not the best, striker in the Championship, maybe the most complete striker in the Championship. And again, as you mentioned, his assists and goals have still been crucial this season, and it feels like that link up with Sainz is, as we've mentioned on a few recent podcasts, almost getting to the sort of Wendia, Pookie sort of levels, or the Houlihan Holt levels. So long may that continue, and fingers crossed that those two don't suffer any injuries between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, while Sainz is feeling the way he is and fueled by confidence the way he is, the challenge for Norwich is to keep getting him into those situations, particularly now. I think it's, and we've seen it a little bit over particularly at Stoke, maybe slightly at Preston as well. Teams are going to begin to try and nullify him in particular, so Norwich are going to have to try and find different routes. But that's kind of what I like about his goals. There's a similarity between them in terms of the way that they're coming, and also then it's about the quality that he uses to produce them. But in terms of the build-up, there's a lot of similar strands that we're seeing now, which I think maybe speaks to what Johannes Hoff Thorup is trying to do. So yeah, it's some start to the season he's had, and now it's going to be about consistency and whether he can maintain it as the Championship hurtles towards that sort of busy December Christmas period post this November international break, which is on the horizon. Deep joys. Paddy, some off the pitch news this week, significant off the pitch news. The EGM, which we've been speaking about a lot in recent weeks, all 6 motions. I'm trying to think off the top of those 6, wasn't that? Yep, 6 motions passed. Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones, and we're probably going to do a longer podcast on this, maybe to reflect on it at some stage and their whole era. But they've now stepped down from the board. They've taken up the role of life presidents. So this was the first official game, I guess, of the post-Delia and Michael era. Whichever way you cut it, and probably irrespective, really, of your views on their tenure as a whole. And there will be lots across the spectrum, and like I say, we'll get into that at a later date. But just a very, very significant moment in Norwich City history.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there seems to be a little bit of a debate across press releases at 27, 28 years, but we're splitting hairs. It's a huge body of work at the helm of a football club in this country. I'm struggling to think of anything similar, and certainly in terms of what they were and always wanted to be known as, which was custodians of a club rooted in its community, where the fans are the most important people, and always try to put them front and centre. Again, as you say, we'll get into it in probably more depth, the legacy maybe, and when it was difficult moments and difficult seasons for them as a pair, but the club in general, and the criticism that came their way, rightly or wrongly. But since this process was first announced a few months ago, and then culminating in obviously the ordinary shareholders, in the sense of not the ones who have the vast bulk of shares, who are now in the board, ratified those resolutions on the table. I think there's been universal gratitude, thanks, love. Whether it's you take your temperature from social media or anecdotally, I saw one or two sort of suggesting could there be a round of just an organic round of applause when they took their seats today. I mean, to my knowledge, that didn't happen. But the groundswell of these two people were, as they always said, just trying to do the best for the football club and pass it on in a better state than they inherited it. And that, I don't think anybody could dispute that is the case, given what we know of Mark Attanasio, Norfolk Holdings, and what the roadmap is from here. No guarantees, of course, but in terms of the financial environment this club has now been placed into, it's vastly different from what it was when they walked through the door firstly to take it over, almost by default, really, as we all know. Very difficult times that was. So, yeah, it is different. It felt epic when it was first announced a few months ago, and it's not quite in terms of formally been ratified. That'll happen towards the end of the season. But to all intents and purposes, and the most visible presence is the fact that they have stepped down from the board with immediate effect. Clearly not stepped down from attending games at Carrow Road. We'll still see them, I'm sure. A very visible presence in the director's box. But yeah, and as I said, we'll probably in the international period coming up now, we'll delve into a bit more the whole Delia and Michael tenure. Long that it was, that warrants more of a forensic analysis. But yeah, there's no doubt that this club now feels like it's setting course for quite an exciting direction under new ownership and a new presence guiding it in the boardroom. And for quite a large constituency of Norwich fans, this will be different. This will feel different. This will look different. And let's see how it goes from here. But it's just, I think for me, just on a personal level, I mean, I've had quite a lot of interaction with them both, and I've always found them nothing but, Norwich nuts in the nicest sense of the words. And in those darker periods, you can't really put yourself into their shoes, but it must have been very difficult to carry that burden and, all that negativity that was sort of thrown in their direction. So to see them not walk off into the sunset, because, to reiterate what I just said, they're going to be at Carrow Road for the foreseeable future, but to go with, almost universal thanks from the fan base, young and old, that's the very least they deserve for me, I think.
Yeah, agreed, because you think of changes in ownership and usually it's toxic, isn't it? And it comes from fan bases either being really unhappy or clubs being in really bad positions, and then someone has to come in and save them. You look at what's happening at Reading at the moment, or in Inverness, north of the border. It can be very a very difficult process. So the fact that it's happened and they've been enabled that sort of period, I guess, where they've been able to have that sort of reaction and people have been able to look back at it fondly is good. And hey, if free draws are the way of this new era, then it's not going to be dull, is it? So maybe that's a nice place to end it. Remarkably, we've just about managed to keep it pretty tight to an hour. So I think that's pretty impressive given all that unfolded at Carrow Road today. PinkUn.com, the place to go, obviously, for all of your news, analysis, reaction to this game, build up to Cardiff next weekend. We'll be doing a pod off the back of that as well. We're all off for a sleep. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. See you again very soon.